So, what am I going to say? There's so much to talk about, but first of all, being here again is such a privilege. And I so think that you have such a lot to be proud of. It is such an exciting spot here, and such an example to the church, certainly within this diocese, but it is so good to be here and part of you today. But I just thought I might just tell you quickly what I'm doing, just so you can catch up with me. Actually, what I am doing, which is quite a surprise I have to say, is that I'm the chair now of the St Martin's Centre Partnership, which is like coming home really. Since Stephen left, there has been a bit of a sort of gap, and Suzanne said, John, I wonder whether you would be prepared to be chair. I said, well, I mean, it's a great honour really, because generally speaking, when vicars leave somewhere, they keep well away, but it's nice to be invited back. And so I said, well, okay, but what we must do is think about succession, because St Martin's Centre Partnership, as those of you who are on it, is so important. And so I said, well, I would do it for a couple of years and see what happens, but we must try and make sure that in those 2 years we find someone else. So that's the first thing I do, and actually I think there's a meeting of the partnership on Wednesday or Tuesday, sometime this week anyway. That's one thing I do. As you probably know, I also have been very involved in the cathedral. I don't know how much you know about what's going on at the cathedral, but it's a massive, great project. I mean, having been here at St Martin's, it taught me an awful lot, and it has been very useful for what I'm doing, or have been doing at the cathedral, and have been very involved in this Common Ground in Sacred Space project. The cathedral is transformed, or is being transformed. You will not recognise it when you go in. Hopefully it's going to be opened in July, and after then you'll be able to go in. All the pews will have gone. I mean, it's just totally, it'll be a wonderful, wonderful space. So that's very exciting, and it's making the most of the cathedral. It's what, in a way, it's exactly what we were trying to do here, is to open the church out to the community. Because the cathedral was fairly sort of contained, but it's opening it out to the city. It's making the most of all the heritage that's in the cathedral. Massive memorials that tell the story of Newcastle over 900 years. And so that's going to be made the most of. But it's this, I think it's £6.5 million project. And the exciting thing about it is that it's much more to do with activity and all the people that will come in as a result, which is very exciting. So do make your way down there after we've opened up again in July. But I'm also at the cathedral under that Common Ground in Sacred Space umbrella. There's something called the Lantern Initiative, which we've got started. As you may know, the cathedral for a long, long time has been a place where people who have been rough sleeping on the streets the night before, refugees, asylum seekers, people who are struggling with their mental health, whatever, have felt able to go into the cathedral because it has that sort of warmth about it and not too scary. And they've been able to come in, and people there have allowed them to sleep on the pews or go to the loos or whatever. So that it's been quite an important part of the cathedral's work for a long time, but it was very itty-bitty. Now we have this Lantern Initiative, which is going to be formalising that work, and of course we can't be doing it at the minute because the cathedral can't be open. But when it does open, well, in fact we've actually appointed the lead of the Lantern Initiative, so it's going to be opening very soon. And then under that umbrella of the Lantern Initiative, we're starting Cafe 16. I'm sure that many of you will have been into the cathedral, into the cafe in the hall before, which they became the Dog Leap Cafe for a while, I think. But anyway, now it's going to be called Cafe 16, not Cafe 21. Some of you may know Cafe 21, which is very posh down on the quayside. It's not, and very expensive too. Cafe 16, I'm not quite sure how it became called Cafe 16, but it's actually a project that what the Cathedral is doing with something called the Oswin Project, which is to do with having a care for people who are leaving prison. And so actually this Cafe 16, who we've also appointed the lead of that, is going to be working with ex-prisoners, prison leavers, to actually help them to get back into society again, to build up their own CVs, in the hopes that, of course, it helps them to get back into employment. And they, with the help of the leader, will be running this project. So that's quite exciting, really. And then there's something else that I think you may have heard of, because I think they had something to do with your debt. There's a project here, I know, which has a care for people who are struggling with money, right? And I think Together Newcastle did have some, Steve Forster, I think, did have something to do with helping you to set that up. I think Stephen knew him quite well. But I seem to have got involved with that too, and have become a volunteer. In fact, Judith, who some of you will know, has just started a new job with them. I mean, at least it gets her out of the house. But she's doing this very interesting thing, which is called Places of Wellbeing. What's so exciting about it is that all the stuff that's happening here is the sort of stuff that's going on in all these sorts of things. So Together Newcastle is all about people discovering more about their community, which we did a long time ago and is ongoing. Then it's actually trying to have a wide-armed welcome for people in the community, which of course happens here, but this is hopefully going to be spread out in churches around the diocese, and of course it's very much what the Cathedral Project is about having a radical welcome for anyone. So that's quite exciting, but it's also, there's a project called Know Your Church, Know Your Neighbour, which is about trying to find out more about your community, and I seem to have become a volunteer there, so I'm actually going around and talking to churches and things. So that is Together Newcastle. There's then just three other things. One is called the Lighthouse Project. I don't know if you've heard of that, which is up at St Michael's. I seem to have become on the steering group, which is very exciting what's happening there. So I suppose when I was here, you know, we sorted out St Silas, we sorted out St Martin's. The St Michael's one was always a much bigger struggle, really. But it looks as if we might be going on the way with a youth and community hub, which of course would be absolutely ideal for Byker, because the local authority took out all the youth services from Byker, so there's not much there. So that's quite interesting as well. I'm involved with John Squires. You may have heard of John Squires. You possibly have heard of Benfield Foundation, or the Squires Foundation. But John was Benfield Motors, basically, and this building here had quite a lot of money from the Benfield Foundation. But I'm working with him with another sort of project which is very similar along the Tyne Valley, of the churches along the Tyne Valley, again helping them to discover more about their communities, and then opening that up opening their buildings up to become places of welcome, so that people can experience, really through us, God's wonderful love. So that's quite exciting. And then finally, I'm involved with something called Rewilding the Church. There's three of us. There's a small group that talk with all sorts of people. I mean, as you know, and I'm hopefully talking with Sandra after this service, it's quite a struggle for churches these days, because you can't easily find clergy. This money has gone way down, and we have to begin to think about new ways of being church in a sort of way. The trouble is that the church can get very sort of bogged down with all the stuff that we have to keep going, whereas what's most important is that we are a community of disciples. Jesus calls us to be disciples, his disciples. We are a community of his disciples, and live out his call wherever we are, whatever that means. And certainly this is something that you're doing here, but it's again trying to think what we're doing. So that is an interesting note. Now, I do actually watch telly sometimes as well, so you know, I've got lots to do and I love it, but I do, it isn't as if it's just things I want to do, really. But that's sort of a catch-up, and I ought to ask you what's going on with you afterwards. I know that some people are still working, even though they're very old. I better be careful with that. Anyway, it's lovely to be here. Just a quick look at the readings then today, because we've got. I have to confess, the second reading from 1 John is quite an obscure reading there, and it's quite difficult to actually understand. But the first one is, it makes me laugh, the first one really, because of course there were only 11 disciples after Judas had killed himself, and so they have this lovely piece here, which is all about Matthias. And I love this idea of the lot falling on Matthias. You sort of think of this great sort of stuff sort of falling from the sky, and there it is on Matthias. I don't know if you were like me, but when I think about this, I think about when I was at school and how you're in a little group and somebody is asked to pick a team and you're picked last, and everybody seems to have experienced that sort of thing. I was always picked last, and it seemed to be, it was very hard. But I do have I'm a bit sad for Joseph called Barsabbas, because he clearly was the one who was not picked. I don't know quite what happened to him afterwards, but one hopes that he also became still very involved with the disciples' community. So that was the choice of the 12 disciples. And then of course there's that wonderful piece from the Gospel, John 17, Jesus talking to God about his disciples. Very much contained, very much a small group of people that Jesus had been talking and working with over a bit of a period of time. And they've been sent out into the world, and Jesus was working in a very personal way with them. What I think about the Ascension, of course today, it was Ascension Day on Thursday, and today is the Sunday after Ascension. Ascension is all about Jesus moving from that very personal relationship to an ascension, somehow or other having a much more clear relationship with the whole of the world. That somehow or other he becomes Lord of all. He's not just our Lord, he's not just the Lord of the disciples, he is Lord of all. And this comes back to the whole welcome thing, our whole inclusive thing about making sure that we give everyone is a child of God, and that people are all included. So that's really quite exciting. I wonder if we could have our Vagabond song now. This is a lovely song which I discovered a little while ago. I think Andrew's known it for quite a long time, but it is a most amazing song. Some of you may know it, and I'll just tell you what the words are afterwards if you can't really hear them. But try and listen to the words, because it is so much about Jesus being Lord of all.
Come all you don't belongs, winners and losers, come people like me. Come all you travelers, tired from the journey, come wait a while, stay a while, welcome you'll be. Come all you questioners, looking for answers and searching for reasons and sense in it all. Come all you fallen and come all you broken, find strength for your body and food for your soul. Come to the feast, there is room at the table. Come, let us meet in this place with the King of all kindness who welcomes us in with the wonder of love and the power of grace. The wonder of love and the power of grace. Who worry about houses and money, every station and orientation, the helpless, the hopeless, the young and the old. Come to the feast, there is room at the table. Come, let us meet in this place, with the King of all kindness who welcomes us in, with the wonder of love and the power of grace. The wonder of love and the power of grace. Believers and dreamers and schemers, and come all you restless just searching for home. Movers and shakers and givers and takers, the happy, the sad, the lost and alone. Come self-sufficient with wearied ambition, and come those who feel at the end of the road. Debaters and religion haters, accusers, abusers, the heard and ignored. Come to the feast, there is room at the table. Come, let us meet in this place, with the King of all kindness who welcomes us in, with the wonder of love and the power of grace. Come to the feast, there is room at the table. Come, let us meet in this place, with the King of all kindness who welcomes us in, with the wonder of love and the power of grace. The wonder of love and the power of grace. The wonder of love and the power of grace.
Now I can imagine the choir here singing that. And I'm sure that Andrew will take that up. It is a lovely song. It's basically saying, everyone. Of course, it doesn't manage to include everyone in the words, but it includes all sorts of different people in that. And it's just, there's a place for everyone. I love the chorus. Come to the feast, there is room at the table. Come, let us meet in this place with the King of all kindness who welcomes us in with the wonder of love and the power of grace. So we are all included. Jesus is Lord of all. And that is just so important today when, there's so much going on in the world where people really struggling. And I just want to say, just before I go, we're finished, a little bit more about that. Because I think we can't not think today about what's going on around us. And of course, one of the first things we think about is COVID-19 and all that's going on in this country. The big question about whether or not we should have the restrictions lifted tomorrow or not. And this whole thing about the Indian virus, the Indian variant, which is really horrible. And I don't know what you've seen in the last few days, but there was a most horrible situation in Kolkata. It was Calcutta, but it's now Kolkata, it's changed its name, but it's so similar, it makes it very difficult. But there was a sort of film strip there, a bit of a film clip, where, there were people just all over the place, and it just seemed to, and I just thought, wow, what people are struggling with there. But of course, there is a big fear in this country now about what's going to happen with this variant. And I've no doubt that there's some anxiety here about that. But wow, what is going on in India and in other places of the world just doesn't bear thinking about. And it's just so sad. But what's so exciting about it, and this is really coming back to the song, there is a place at the table, there is room at the table for everyone, including those people that we see so desperate in those sorts of conflicts. Jesus is their Lord as well, And that makes us a massive, strong connection between us, which is just so amazing and so wonderful. Jesus is their Lord too. And then, of course, the other thing I find myself thinking about a lot is the whole situation in Israel and Palestine. I mean, I don't know again if you saw this, but yesterday there was in Gaza. Now, Judith has been to Gaza when she was working for Christian Aid, and so understands it even more. It's a very crowded space. But there was this thing that happened yesterday when this tower block was just blown up. They had an hour. They had an hour to get out. There was Al Jazeera, which is a news media thing, and the News Corporation, Associated Press, I think. And then there were people living there on top in apartments. They had an hour to get out. Can you imagine what that must be like if suddenly somebody came up, gave you a phone call, excuse me, we're going to blow up your house in an hour. What do you take with you? And just to try and stand in their shoes. But there we are with Israel, and I was looking at a program last night about it. It's an amazing thing called The Promise, and it makes it very clear that, of course, after the Second World War, were all these Jews still in the internment camps, and they needed a place. They needed a place to go to, so they all went to Israel, to Palestine as it was then. And then, of course, it became Israel. But the idea was that actually somehow or other they would have a care for the people who'd been there for hundreds of years, i.e. the Arabs. But what a mess, what a sad situation. And who's to say where it actually goes to? And this sort of thing of land being constantly taken from the Palestinians and their rights violated. So, I don't know, I mean, but there again, it makes me think about the Vagabond song and about the Ascension and about Jesus being Lord of all, that they are filled with fear and anxiety. We are all often in our own situations with our own circumstances and have such fear and anxiety, but Jesus is Lord of everyone. There is room at the table for them too. The trouble is, of course, that necessarily the problem doesn't go away. I mean, you can say that, it sounds so glib really. There is room at the table for you, but what about now? And it's a very difficult question, but what one can say is God is with them. God is with us, and ultimately He will have a care for us then. But what does this all mean for us? I mean, so what? What is the challenge to us today? And I think, certainly for me, and I suspect it may well be for you as well, there is a temptation to sort of hide away sometimes, to try and pretend it isn't all happening, try and remain safe and in our comfort zones, because it's just too scary out there and we can't face it. But there is a challenge, and that is that we are, each one of us, as Christ, Jesus' disciples, called to be His hands, called to be His feet, called to be His eyes, called to be His ears, to be Christ in the world today. And, that is an amazing thing that Jesus wants us. He trusts us to be that. And it does give us a responsibility, but what does that actually mean? There's an amazing prayer that I discovered the other day, which is, I think, quite challenging really, which was actually written by Sir Francis Drake, so it's not recent. And it really challenged me, so I'm just going to pray it as we come to an end. So let's just be quiet for a moment. And the prayer goes like this: disturb us, Lord, when we want to remain in our comfort zone. Disturb us when our dreams have come true because we have dreamed too little. Disturb us when we have arrived safely because we sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, Lord, to dare more boldly, to venture on to wild seas, where storms will show us your mastery, where losing sight of land, we shall find the stars. We ask you to push back the horizons of our hopes and to push back the future in strength, courage, hope and love. This we ask in the name of our King, who is Jesus Christ. And the question is, what does it mean for you, me, as a church and as individuals? And that, of course, I leave with you. Amen.